Welcome to Target Market Insights, the Multifamily and Marketing Podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insight, the Multifamily and Marketing Show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying the show, I need you to do me one quick favor and leave us that 5-star rating and review. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Bill Bice. Bill Bice is an entrepreneur at heart, starting his first company at age 14, putting on road races with corporate sponsors. Now, he's been a programmer as well, and he founded Boomtime, tackling marketing as a technology problem. It turns out that when you follow the data, really good things seem to happen. And that's why Boomtime built the world's first marketing as a service platform called Fuse. Now, Boomtime's marketing strategists follow the data. They already know what will work. And instead of reinventing the wheel, Boomtime applies proven marketing techniques at scale. We're going to talk to Bill a lot about that and more. Let's welcome to the show, Bill Bice.
Hey, John. It's great to be here with you.
Hey, Bill. How are you doing today?
It's a beautiful day out. I live in a wonderful place, and so I'm very lucky to be in the place I am.
Excellent. Well, Bill, I kind of went over your bio at a very high level, and I skipped over a huge chunk of time, right? I started with, being 14 and doing the road races to launching Boomtime. So why don't you fill in the gap there as far as what you've done from a professional standpoint?
Yeah. So what happened in between is what led me to starting Boomtime, which is I started a software company when I was 18, and because I thought I already knew it all, it took me a really long time to actually figure out how to build that business. But eventually we became the leader in our niche, which was software for running law firms and corporate legal departments and so on. And we got a really nice exit out of that business, selling it to Thomson Reuters. That got me on the management team of this $2 billion division of a very large company. And that gave me the opportunity to go and work with more startups. So I founded a series of companies. I've invested in a lot of startups. And what I'm doing today came directly out of that experience because, it's kind of an obvious correlation, but when you're really good at marketing, when you nail the go-to-market, then all that hard work for whatever it is that you do, that it's marketing that really determines the payoff. And I got really frustrated in how difficult it is to get good marketing consistently. And when you're spending your own money on marketing, you want it to actually work.
And Bill, we talked a little bit before we hit the record button, but I come from more of that traditional marketing background where I've worked for corporations, I've worked at the agency level, and part of the frustration that I felt both as a client as well as on the agency side was really trying to dig deeper into specifically understanding what worked and what didn't work. There's a joke or inside joke amongst marketers that, only half of the advertising is working. The problem is they don't know what half, right? So I know that you kind of focus more on really using the data and take more of a scientific approach to develop sound marketing campaigns. Help me understand a little bit more about some of the frustrations you felt that led to kind of this epiphany.
Yeah. So, I am a programmer at heart, and so when I looked at this problem, it was just natural for me to tackle it in terms of the data. And the great thing about being digitally connected is we actually have the opposite problem now. So before, that quote is famously attributed to John Wanamaker, who is the guy who created department stores. And now we actually have the opposite problem, which is we have too much data because we can have information on every single engagement that we create, but how do we turn that into something that we can actually make intelligent decisions on? And so the advantage I have is the ability to aggregate that data across hundreds of similar businesses so that we're able to see the trends very quickly. And what we did is took the same sort of lean startup approach of constantly iterating and applied it to marketing. So, every time every new campaign, let's get better. Let's learn from what we did. Let's make sure we're testing something every time so that every iteration we're improving our marketing, understanding what's creating engagement and what's really working.
Yeah, you talked about constantly iterating and constantly testing, which I think are key if you're going to be successful. I think too many people assume that you come up with an idea, you put it out there, and either works or it doesn't work, right? And you just expect the customers to show up and the sales to go through the roof, and it doesn't quite work that way. There's tweaks sometimes that need to happen. Sometimes campaigns are off. Sometimes the messaging is right, but the audience is wrong or the vehicle is off. There are a lot of different variables that come into play if you are going to optimize your messaging. And to your point about having so much information, it's almost information overload. I know one of the last things that I used to face on the agency side with my clients was there was so much information, but there wasn't a whole lot of insights, right? And I think that's something that most of our listeners, no matter what your specific field of interest is right now, even as a real estate investor, there's a ton of information available. What you need is insights. You need to be able to bullseye and kind of laser focus in on the key data points that are going to allow you to drive success, as opposed to taking in every single point of data that is available to you. So I know that you guys really focus on testing and iterating and pivoting as you go through the different campaigns. How would you kind of approach that to try to figure out what data points are important as opposed to things that may just be ultimately some background noise?
Well, this is one of the classic problems that smaller businesses have in competing with the big guys, because if you're a Fortune 500 company, you can put in the Adobe Marketing Suite and really get ways to pull all those different analytic streams together into one overview that really helps you drive insights out of that. That's difficult to do for a small business. It's part of why we had to develop Fuse, was to do exactly that. So, we specialize in B2B, which in some ways is actually simpler, because there's really only three channels that you have to be great at to be successful in B2B. Your website should always be the centerpiece of your marketing. We always want to drive people back to the website. Email marketing is still what actually drives the behavior that we're interested in. And then we have this, amazing tool in LinkedIn that lets us get to exactly the right prospects that we're interested in. So if, for example, if you're looking for more investors, one of the best things you can do is build out your network on LinkedIn and then constantly show off your expertise. That's really the best marketing. And if you tie those three channels together, and then you get the view of what the customer journey is like across those three channels, that's really where you get the insights from. It's really difficult to do it with just Google Analytics or just your, MailChimp stats. It's by pulling it all together that you understand how it's all working and what's the content that's really hitting our objective. It's creating the engagement that we want, is pulling people in, and we see them coming deeper and deeper into the funnel and getting the results that we're after.
No, I love that. I think that, you just nailed something for many of our listeners. From a B2B standpoint, you said there are three primary channels to focus on. One is your website. The second is email marketing. And then the third is LinkedIn, which I want to push on a little bit and understand why LinkedIn as opposed to more popular and more active social media platforms, particularly Facebook. But the website, email marketing, and LinkedIn are kind of those three channels to focus on. Talk to me a little bit more about LinkedIn. Why that one versus, say, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or some of those platforms that are more popular?
Well, it's not that you're not on those platforms, but if you're in a B2B context, where we see the results from are LinkedIn. So being on Facebook is more just to have a presence there. It's not where we see that we're actually going to pull in, sales opportunities for a high ticket B2B product or service, or where we're going to find new investors for the next project that we're working on. The reason I love LinkedIn is because the one form of marketing that absolutely works is word of mouth. And it sounds really old school, right? This idea of, well, if I take care of my clients, I take care of my investors, then I'm going to get referrals. And it's just this thing that happens. Well, the amazing thing about us all being digitally connected is that we can really amplify the effect of word of mouth. And LinkedIn is the perfect way to do that, because it's the ideal networking event. Like, I mean, where do you find investors? Where do you create those sales opportunities? Well, it's through networking. But here we are in LinkedIn, where I can meet only exactly the people that I want to. I can do it at a scale that just isn't possible with in-person events. In the time we're recording this right now, when we're dealing with the current crisis of COVID-19, we don't even have those in-person events to go to. So we have to use LinkedIn, and that's just going to accelerate the trend that was already occurring. Like, we're going to get to the other side of this crisis, and it's going to make LinkedIn that much more important to your business, because we're all learning how we can do more business today without face-to-face meetings, with less travel expense. That's still going to be the case when we're on the other side of this crisis. So the advantage to building your network on LinkedIn, and that's just step one. Then step two is to be constantly talking to that network and showing off your expertise. So this is just a perfect way to get to the right people and stay in front of them forever.
Great tips. Build your network on LinkedIn and then stay in front of them by showing off your expertise. Can you give us a little bit of tips there, right? So as we talk about showing off your expertise, what are maybe some best practices or some things that you see that work effectively versus things that you see and you kind of shake your head or cringe a little bit?
Yeah, so the number one thing is if you take that analogy of the networking event or the cocktail party and carry it all the way through, that's exactly what you want to be like on LinkedIn. So it would be unusual for you to meet somebody at a cocktail party and then immediately pull out your PowerPoint deck and start giving them a sales pitch. And yet that's what so many people do on LinkedIn, and it's completely overdone. It doesn't work. You need to build a relationship first if you're serious about creating opportunities in the future. So the right way to come into LinkedIn is the same way that you would in a networking event, which is to be there to build your network, to provide value to that network. And the best way you can do that is not send out a bunch of sales messages, but instead take this insight perspective driven approach. Whatever your niche is, whatever you're great at, that gives you unique perspective, and your best marketing is to share that. It's a thought leadership approach to marketing. That's what works really well on LinkedIn. The thing that makes it hard is that you've got to do it day in and day out. So when we're running a campaign on LinkedIn, so first of all, we'll send 40 to 50 connection requests a day, every single day. And each one of those is personalized for that specific target market. It's one of the biggest mistakes people make when they start to scale up LinkedIn, which is they start to think about, well, this is something I'm going to send out to hundreds of people, but you're going to send it out one at a time. And so you need to write it for an audience of one. And then you really have to focus on the things that are going to maximize the acceptance rate of your connections. And the three biggest factors are, what's your headline, which shouldn't just be your title. It should be, what you're passionate about, what you're great at. Why would I care about connecting with you? And then how many connections we have in common. That's absolutely huge. And then, of course, the message that you send in that connection request. So often, particularly if you're starting with a smaller network on LinkedIn, you need to build up a bigger base before you really get to the ideal connections that you want, because you want to have that large number of connections in common so you get as high an acceptance rate as possible. And then once you've built up that network, then the key is to have a regular, our goal is to do 4 to 6 activities on LinkedIn a week on each profile, week in and week out. So now you're staying in front of that big network that you've built up, and you're constantly talking to them about what you're an expert at. And what does that do? It makes you the obvious choice to go to when whatever that is, that issue comes up. You're already there. They already have a relationship with you.
There you go. Wonderful tips there. Very powerful. I love the analogy of treating it like a cocktail party, because, I'm sure you get this all the time as well, but, I will get connections where before I could even respond, there's 7 paragraphs and, a link to a presentation or, their calendar. And don't you want to hop on a phone call and talk about this? I'm like, I didn't even get to say hello yet. So, a lot of people definitely abuse kind of the inbox function on LinkedIn. I think really don't use it the right way. But your point of, really connecting with people, building your network, taking the time to engage with them and then focusing on the activities. And to be clear, the activities are like, those are your posts, those are articles, those are, videos that you may put up or sharing sharing other people's content, things like that, right? To really give value to the audience before you start to really try to engage with people and try to transition those relationships from, just people in your connections to, some type of one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's not only your content, but it's also taking the time to like and comment on the content from your network, because that's the best thing you can do to increase the engagement that you get in your own content.
No, great tips there. Great tips. And why does this work on LinkedIn more effectively than, say, Facebook or some of these other platforms?
Well, because it's all about context, right? When you're on Facebook, you're there in a personal context. And if you're trying to sell something high ticket, or you're trying to bring an investor in on your next project, it's just the wrong context. That's not what they're thinking about. When you're on LinkedIn, it's business minded. That's what you're working on. And so you're in the right context. It's just it's really tough to make that switch. And, if you're doing B2C, yeah, Facebook makes a ton of sense. It's a lot more about Instagram right this second. And the things we're talking about here just don't, particularly on Instagram, they don't translate well into a B2B world.
Yeah, great points there. So, and it comes down to it, right? Where, I know from our standpoint, it's a bit tricky because we work with investors, and many of our listeners, are either investors or, they work with investors as well. And in some regards, you can call that B2B. Sometimes it's B2C. So we kind of have to play on both platforms. But what I find interesting for us, at least in our business, is our connections on LinkedIn. It's clear of what the base is for the conversations, right? It's more professional. It's more business oriented. So people are more receptive to having a conversation about investments. I find on Facebook, unless it's in like a group, if you're in an investing group setting or something like that, it's really difficult to kind of pivot someone who's just looking at cat videos to now want to talk about, investing $100,000 into a deal. The other piece of that's hard is, really getting visibility, because the organic reach from a business standpoint on Facebook is so hard to get to at this point, that you really do have to have paid ads if you want your business content to reach these individuals. It just becomes much harder. So, LinkedIn, there's still really good organic reach that's available on LinkedIn. So it's the reason we really prefer that platform as well for the things we do. Facebook certainly has its role, but when we're talking about, investing and connecting with investors, we actually heavily prefer LinkedIn to Facebook. Bill, you have a playbook that's available, right? So you've talked a lot about B2B thus far, talked about kind of those three main platforms: website, email marketing, and LinkedIn. I know you have a playbook available. Can you talk a little bit about, one, what a playbook is for someone who is not familiar with that term, and how can our listeners kind of access this playbook to kind of help them with some of the things they're working on?
Yeah, so we've spent the last 6 years doing this testing and iteration to really figure out what works. And I take my own advice, right? Because the best marketing you can do is to give whatever the most valuable insight that you have is, and give that away for free. That is the best marketing you can do. And we do exactly the same thing. So our B2B Marketing Playbook is taking all the things we've learned over the last 6 years and laying it out for you in a guide that says, here, if you want to go do this, you absolutely need to, then we're telling you all the things that we have learned. So, we've just talked about some of those things in LinkedIn, but as an example, how you post that content in LinkedIn, just doing it the right way, you've got the right strategy here, but now the specific tactics of how you do the post, you can increase your engagement 4 to 6x just in changing how you do the post. But you only find these things out by constantly testing. So if you come to, if you find me on LinkedIn, or if you come to our website at boomtime.com, we're doing exactly this. We're giving away the best advice we have for free, because one, I want as many small businesses to do this as possible. And two, the best way to demonstrate what we're really good at is to show it.
Man, I love that. First of all, We talk about taking our own advice. I'm going to download that as soon as we finish this recording, because one, even as a marketer, no matter how much experience you have, and I don't know about you, Bill, but I still find great value in seeing what's working for other people. Even if 90% of it is stuff that we're either doing or we're familiar with, there may be a nugget in there or something that could really help us change our perspective on. And to your point, it might just be post on LinkedIn. I mean, we've had to post hundreds of times and look at, all right, this one got, 30 likes and 20 comments. This one got 50 likes and 30 comments. This one got 10 and 2. This one got 3 and 1. Well, what happened? What do we do here that we didn't do here? Asking questions works great, but sometimes if you post the link in the body of that initial post, that link will kill, the algorithm. So it's really understanding all those things, and you can take the time and test it all out yourself. Or you can listen to people and take advantage of the research they've already done and implement some of that for yourself. So I'm certainly going to download this, and I would implore any of our listeners who are interested in developing a marketing playbook for their own business, whether that's real estate investing, attracting capital for deals, or really just building your own personal brand, to download it as well and just take a look at what's going on and what Bill and his team have been able to build as far as best practices, because these are the kind of things we need to really run an effective business. Bill, you also recently launched the B2B Marketing Podcast. Why did you decide to launch this podcast?
Because, I think podcasting is the perfect example of the core theme we're talking about here, which is really good marketing is a consistent flow of great, insightful content. And that, that's why it works so well for you, right? You love creating the content, and it comes through in just listening to your podcast. But even if that's not what you love, you still have to figure out a way to get that done, because it's what works really well. And so my advice to the vast majority of business owners is go find somebody who's really good at creating the content, who can take your ideas, who will spend the time to capture your voice and give you that flow of content. I mean, that's essentially what we've created in our business. And we built a network of 300 subject matter experts to be able to do that, to be able to write to just about any audience that we come across. And that's what makes it work, is getting that steady flow of content. Well, podcast is just a perfect way to do that. And what we've laid out in our B2B Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast is all these things that we have learned. And every time we find some new nugget, we get on the podcast and talk about it.
No, I love it. Well, definitely make sure we link to that, because obviously we're fans of podcasting as well. But I think for us, the thing that we love in addition, and I'll say this selfishly, right? I'm sitting here talking to a B2B marketing expert, and we're able to share this conversation with an audience, right? And have great insights that we can uncover and ask the kind of questions that we would want to ask, and really provide a ton of value. And for me, that's really been the best part of it, is really being able to dig a little deeper with some of the key insights that can help us grow as well as help our audience grow, and really figure out what does it take to move our business forward. So it's a great platform to, truly not just become a thought leader, but to really demonstrate your commitment to helping others. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is clear for any podcaster, because, many folks start out and you have a smaller audience, especially if you haven't already built up an audience through some other means. So you're starting out with a small audience and you're building this thing brick by brick. And you really have to be passionate. You really have to be committed to build it brick by brick. And as you're doing that, people will take notice and people will watch what you're doing. And it's a great way to build your personal brand as well as kind of give back to the community as you build with that community. Bill, I want to talk to you about some of the things you've done from a business standpoint, right? So you've built a couple different businesses. What has been really the biggest challenge that you've seen in building a large business?
Well, so the biggest mistake I made in building my first company was that I wasn't open to advice. I didn't accept mentorship. And even though it took me a long time, because I was successful, that then set me up to think that I actually knew how to do it. Well, it turns out that it's really difficult to build a business every single time. So I finally started to take the opposite approach, which is, one of the amazing abilities we have as humans is to project ourselves into the future. Like, we can actually imagine, we can understand what it would be like to be in a different place. Well, there's somebody who's already done whatever it is you're working on right now, who already has the experience. You need to find them and learn from them. And so many people are willing to help out if you just reach out to them and ask for that help, because they love sharing the fact that they've actually figured something out, right? We all naturally want to do that. So learning from people who've already been there and done that, I think is the fastest way to accelerate whatever your career is, whatever your goals are.
I mean, listen, they say success leaves clues. And if you can identify people who've had that success already and learn from them, you're able to cut down your learning curve drastically. It's interesting to hear you say that, though, Bill, because for someone who started out so young, I mean, you talked about that first company at 14, right? And building that first major company at 18, you've been doing this at such a young age, and doing this successfully for a period of time. I could understand how, at times it may be difficult to listen to other people or recognize that, hey, there may be other ways to do this, or there's advice that I should be taking from someone else. For someone right now who is kind of bootstrapping their own business, they're an entrepreneur, they're getting it done. Maybe they're doing everything right now. Maybe they could listen to others or use some help, but that's not really the way they operate. What would you say to them to help them understand that there may be a more efficient or more effective way to grow their business?
Well, it really comes down to, do you care more about the results that you produce or getting to say it was all you? And I think the process of getting there and what that experience is like is it's not just about the end. In fact, if you're successful in your business, what are you most likely going to do? You're going to go start another business. So what that experience is like is really crucial, and doing that with a team. So first of all, one of my biggest recommendations for any entrepreneur is find a partner, because the likelihood of success is so much higher when you have somebody else that is in it with you, whose skill set is complementary. I mean, it's the number one thing I want when I'm looking at a brand new startup. I want the person with that idea to go find a partner who believes in it as much as they do, that adds the component they're missing. Like, none of us are good enough to do everything that a business needs. So you need partners and you need mentors that have already been there. It's going to speed up everything you do by, a factor of 10. So just do it.
Yeah, finding that right partner, finding that right mentor, that's something we are adamant on as well. But sometimes it's not as easy as just, finding that person. I mean, what kind of things are you looking for to vet both the character of a potential partner or mentor, as well as just, I think ultimately the fear people have is, hey, I don't want to enter into this, this partnership or this relationship and still be stuck or have it not work out. So how do you vet kind of those concerns as you're looking for that partner or that mentor?
So it's like any relationship building, right? So it is risky. On the mentor side, I think is a lot easier, because the answer to that is seek out multiple mentors. That it's not one person who knows everything. And so the goal isn't to find one person sitting on top of the mountain that has all the answers. It's to get multiple perspectives. That's how you get the most value. Now, when you talk about bringing a partner into your business, well, yeah, that is tough to do. And the relationship is really important. At the same time I say that, 50-50 partnerships tend to be really difficult. So it doesn't bother me at all for somebody who has the driving idea to have a larger portion of the equity and in the end be able to make the call. Tiebreakers are a really tough place to be. But that doesn't mean you don't have huge benefit from providing equity in your enterprise to other people who are going to put in the same kind of blood, sweat that you are. There's a huge benefit to that. And if you can't convince somebody to do that, to take, less compensation today in exchange for equity, then you have to really question, is this good enough that I should be doing that same thing?
Great points there. Appreciate that. Let's go back to marketing. You talked about kind of skill sets in a partnership, and marketing has been something that you've really landed on, and as we talked about those three things that B2B marketers need to be employing, where are you seeing people make the most mistakes in their marketing plans for their business?
Well, let's start with the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake is talking about yourself. Nobody cares. The great marketing is all about your audience and what is important to them. So for the vast majority of businesses, 90% of their marketing is about themselves. You got to flip that on its head. You can do the 10% that's about the new client and the new service, the new product, whatever. 90% of it needs to be what's relevant to your audience. What's the expertise you're bringing to the table that helps them in their business and their career. That's what makes great marketing. And that's why so many companies' marketing just doesn't work. It's about the wrong things. The second biggest mistake is the lack of consistency. There are no miracles in marketing. Yeah, every once in a while you get lucky, but it's not repeatable. It doesn't keep happening. The only marketing that really works is to pick the right strategy and stick with it long term. And so when you were talking about building podcasting brick by brick, that was a great example. Right? You don't get an audience overnight. Even if you already have an audience from another channel, getting it moved over, it just doesn't happen overnight. And so if you start down the road of the marketing strategy we're talking about here, it's not going to be month 1, month 2, month 3. You're going to start to see some things month 6, but where you're really going to get the payoff is month 12, month 24. That's when it really starts to work. And that's what makes it difficult, because this is what really works, but it only works because it's a long-term commitment.
There you go, guys. There's no overnight success model here. It's funny. We're talking about podcasting right now, but I'm sure you would say the same really works across any marketing strategy, unless you have, a huge budget where you can throw a bunch of paid dollars behind a TV campaign or a Facebook campaign or something like that. If you're building this thing organically, it's going to take time. I spoke to a few folks on this show. I'm thinking about Rashonda Scott, and she talked about how she built her Instagram followers. She's got over 40,000 Instagram followers. And she's like, well, the first thing is I built it over the course of 3 years. Post by post is how we built it, right? And it's the same thing with anything in the business. It's really a brick by brick type of approach. So, if you're listening to this, if you're getting frustrated that, you're not seeing the growth that you would have expected, you've put 6 months in, you've been posting every day or whatever the case may be, part of it is just to stick with it. If you know that you're doing the right thing and you're talking to the right people, your audience is there, certainly review what you're doing. Maybe your messaging is off. I mean, as Bill said, if you're just talking about yourself the whole time, maybe that listener or that viewer, they don't see how you can help them. So you're not really providing the value that you need. So maybe think about that messaging, but continue to take action. You just may need to tweak your messaging and how you come across as well. But one of the other challenges that I know a lot of people have right now is, let's just take podcasting since we've been picking on that. There's so much information, as we talked about. There's so many people who are providing information right now. How do we stand out? How do we stand out in a sea of what may look like sameness when we're trying to connect with our target audience and they have so many other people, whether it be competitors or, just distractions in general? There's so much noise out there. How do we cut through all that clutter and really connect with this audience?
Well, all of that is absolutely true. But honestly, so few people actually do this well, where what they focus on is sharing great expertise consistently over time. That has to be the base. So you're talking about, companies who have a big advertising budget, and yet so many businesses, their advertising spend is actually wasted because they haven't built the foundation first, right? They're not good at capturing the leads that are coming into them. They're not good at following up on the leads that they have, and they don't put in the work to stay in front of the audience that they're building. So I would argue, build the foundation first, so that all of the other activity that you're doing suddenly becomes much more valuable. So if you really want to compress the time frame, you got to build the foundation first, and then you can spend some dollars behind it in order to grow that audience. But for a ton of businesses, bootstrapping is really the best route to get there, because going out, all the effort you put into getting investors, and I'm not talking about on the real estate investing side, but just on the business side, the effort it would take you to go get the investors would be better spent getting clients and building your audience, because the same amount of effort gets you the actual end result that you're looking for. And there just aren't that many startups that actually deserve to have professional investment. Most of the time, it's much better to actually go out and get the clients and scratch your way slowly to the point of having a large enough audience that it becomes relevant. So what we see on LinkedIn is that the sort of the first big milestone is when you get to about 3,000 connections. That's when you really have a big enough base that your acceptance rate starts to jump up. And so when you're doing well, you should be, when you line up all the things we were talking about before, you should have low 40% to low 50% of your connection requests being accepted. And that means that you're adding 800 to 1,000 connections to your network every month in and month out. So does that get you there in month one? No. But look at where you're going to be 12 months from now. And then what we see is when you get to somewhere in the 5,000 to 6,000 connection range, is it starts to grow organically if you're really doing a good job of sharing useful information. Because then the exposure you're getting to the network of the people in your network draws more people to you. And now you're starting to grow your followers just organically. That's the key point, is when you hit that switch. And in fact, you switch your button on LinkedIn from connect to follow, which communicates that that's who you are. You're somebody that I want to follow because of the depth of expertise that you are sharing. I don't think there's a way to change the physics of the time that it takes. That's the whole frustration with marketing. We want leads right now. We want business right this second. God, it'd be great if it worked that way, but it just doesn't. And that's why we end up with this approach to marketing that is random acts of marketing. That's what most businesses do, random acts of marketing. And what I want to do is get you out of that, get you into a long-term strategy that will pay off, because you're going to be doing this a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. The sooner you start on a long-term strategy that's really going to pay off, the sooner you're going to get the results from that.
Bill, powerful points right there. I really, I want to just reemphasize a few things that you said. One, as we talked about, this is a long-term strategy. Specifically for LinkedIn, you said that the 3,000 connections was kind of that milestone. And I will say personally that I agree. And I've seen that myself where, we kind of hit that number, and it went from me reaching out to a lot of different people to a lot of people reaching out to me. And I really didn't have to, spend as much energy connecting with people. I had to spend more energy like accepting and responding. Now, unfortunately, some of those people were the folks at the cocktail party who were, giving me their resume and giving me their presentation immediately. But nonetheless, if you can weave through that, you can connect. And I'll say another tip that I've seen and that's worked for us is the way you engage with that audience, right? Because if you make a post, the great thing about LinkedIn is, if you and I are following each other, Bill may comment on a post I make. Well, Bill's audience sees that. So they can now comment. So these are people that don't know me, but also are interested in marketing that I can now connect with. So if some of those people start to respond or comment, I can now friend or engage with them because they've engaged with my content. They know who I am because they engaged in my post, right? So there are ways to make it where you're not just, reaching out to random people, but you can take more of a strategic approach to say, hey, I'm going to go through people in my network. I'm going to respond or comment on their posts and try to, engage and build relationships with people who are already engaging in kind of a similar space as well. So lots of techniques and strategies there to grow. But the key thing is you have to be active. You have to, be consistent and take these actions on a consistent basis. Hey, Bill, before we go to our Bullseye Round, I have one last question. We've been talking a little bit about investors and bootstrapping. I want to get your take because you've got kind of a VC background and experience in the VC space as well. Bootstrapping versus raising money. Tell me a little bit more about kind of your perspective there.
So the thing you got to realize is that if you take professional investment, the day you do that, you're committing to sell your business. And the vast majority of entrepreneurs don't understand that connection. And now you're going to have this outside influence that has all kinds of strings attached to that money, whose only goal is to get a return on that investment. And if we're talking about VC type investment, if they don't see a direct route for where investing $100,000, $1 million in your business is going to give them a 10x return on that, then you don't have a VC style or an angel style deal that makes sense to take to them. So you've got to really be honest with yourself about what makes sense, because so many entrepreneurs sort of see that allure of the Silicon Valley approach. And it's great if you're in Silicon Valley or your roommate now is a partner at a Silicon Valley VC firm. Great. You can run with that if your idea deserves it. So many companies would be better off just bootstrapping. And these days, frankly, even the companies that deserve VC investment aren't going to get it until they have a certain level of monthly recurring revenue and have demonstrated the core elements of a startup. They've got product market fit, because it's so much easier to start a business now. In the .com era, what would cost $10 million to create a company, you can do for $100,000 today. And so if you can't put on your credit cards, get friends and family to put that $100,000 in, you're not going to get professional investors to come to the table at all. And so it's just the whole market has shifted in terms of what that investment looks like.
There you have it. And, we see something similar in the real estate space where, this is the reason we do syndication. It's easier to kind of pull together a group of individual investors with smaller investment amounts with a clear understanding of the business plan versus going out and getting that institutional capital where, like you said, those funds come with strings attached and very clear expectations of how the deal is going to be run. And you lose some of that ability to really manage the deal. So appreciate kind of that perspective there, Bill. Let's transition to our Bullseye Round. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
So the first company that I started after selling the software company we were talking about before, I honestly thought I knew how to do it. I had the magic touch, and it took that not working to really get how hard it is to do again. So that was an important lesson to learn, so that I'd do it the right way the next time around. It's always hard to create a business, and yes, the experience is beneficial. VC investors would prefer to invest in. They don't mind that you've had a failure. In fact, it increases the likelihood you're going to get an investment because you've already had that experience. I kind of flipped it around, and even though it took me a while to make the first company successful, I still needed that failure in order to get enough humility to tackle it the right way.
What book have you recommended or gifted the most in the last year?
So I love Simon Sinek's new book, The Infinite Game, which is all about the power of capitalism when it's applied the right way. And I think the best entrepreneurs, they're playing the infinite game, and it really attracts the best talent because we all want to be part of something bigger. And if it really is something bigger, then it's bigger than you. And that's really what the infinite game is all about.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
The Growth Hackers community is great. It really ties to one of my core principles, which is that so often in marketing, people start with a blank slate, which I just find is crazy. There's already somebody who spent millions of dollars proving out whatever it is you want to do. So go learn from that. There's somebody who has run exactly the test that you're thinking about. Go find it. Imagine how much farther you're going to be ahead by learning from that.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
The best thing I have done in my career is 5 years ago, I started meditating, and things have gotten a little crazy right now. I got away from that a little bit, and I started to feel it. Like I don't make as good of decisions when I'm not meditating. So it's really important to me to meditate every morning. It makes it much easier to just take a couple of minutes during the day and recenter and be in a better place.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew 12 months ago?
That I knew 12 months ago? Well, if we had the longer time period, it would definitely be the mentorship thing. And I know I keep talking about that, but it is so absolutely important. If we could do 2 months ago, it would be sell all your stock. That would be the one 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think many of us will fall into that same boat, right? To sell everything, wait it out, and profit. So, yes. What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious about. I'm naturally curious about everything, but what I'm really paying attention to right now is all of the trends that were already happening that are going to be massively accelerated because of the crisis that we're in right this second. And whatever it is you do, you've got to be rethinking we're going to be on the other side of this. There's going to be a steep recovery on the other side, but business is going to be changed forever because of what we're going through right now. And this is the best time for you to be figuring out what that means to you, because the recovery is going to be uneven between industries and uneven between businesses within industries. And the businesses that put in the time now to rethink what this is going to be like on the other side are the ones that are going to benefit the most.
I agree completely with you right there. All right, Bill, we've talked about a lot. Sorry. All right, Bill, we've talked about a lot of great things there. I have to ask you the most important question of all. You're out there somewhere in the mountains near Albuquerque, right? You have to give me the best place to grab a bite.
Well, the options are a little more limited at the moment, but if I'm coming here, I would go to the Shed in Santa Fe, because if you come to New Mexico, you have to experience the red chili. It's kind of addictive. It's what makes it difficult to escape once you're here.
There you go. So we got a place there to check out. We'll definitely keep that in mind next time we're out that way. Bill, lots of great information here. Can you give our listeners a way to get in touch with you, as well as where they can access the B2B Marketing Playbook, as well as the B2B Marketing Podcast?
Yeah, so you've probably gotten the sense that I love talking about marketing. You can reach out to me at ceo@boomtime.com. Find me on LinkedIn. Go to our website at boomtime.com. There'll be a thing that pops up, and you can download the B2B Marketing Playbook. Find us wherever you get your podcasts for the B2B Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast.
Excellent. Bill, listen, lots of great information today. I really appreciate you coming on the show and giving some great information, especially for those folks who are looking to build a B2B business, specifically talking about the three main platforms we need to be playing on, making sure our website is strong, making sure we're doing email marketing, and leveraging LinkedIn to build our connections with other potential business owners. Bill, this has been a lot of fun, great information talking to you, and I hope you have a great day. Let's talk to you again soon, okay?
Excellent. Thanks, John.